So on a whole slew of questions on this 51st state business and annexing Canada, we say good morning again to Scott Lucas, who's a professor of international politics. He knows the U.S. and international scene inside out, and he's at University College Dublin right now. He's the founder and editor of EA Worldview. We talk to him often, and boy, I'm glad to see you this morning. Hi, Professor Scott Lucas.
It's so good to be here, Heather. Thanks to you and all your great viewers.
Listen, I have a whack of questions for you, so I'm going to jump into them right off the bat. I want to begin earlier in the hour, Professor. We listened to one of my colleagues in Washington answer a question for a woman named Muriel Hopper. It was Paul Hunter who was answering the question, but Muriel Hopper had this question. I'm just interested in your adding maybe a little bit of information to it. She wanted about whether Donald Trump has the authority. Can he go ahead with tariffs without renegotiations or meeting, without signatures or confirmation? That's what she's curious about, how much jurisdiction he has to go ahead with this threat of 25% tariffs.
That's a great question, Heather. In standard circumstances, tariffs are within the jurisdiction of the executive, the presidency. And as we saw in the first Trump term, sometimes through tweets on social media, he would just announce tariffs, not just on China, but on American allies. You know, he announced them on the European Union, including steel and aluminum tariffs. He announced them on Brazil, on Japan, South Korea. Now, in Canada's case, what makes this a little bit different is that you've got a binding agreement, which used to be the North American Free Trade Area, now the USMCA agreement. And the question here is whether Trump's tariffs would violate the provisions of the USMCA tariff. So you could have Canada coming back and saying, look, you know, we're going to take legal action here in terms of the violations. Canada could take that to international jurisdictions such as the World Trade Organization as well. But the problem here is that legal action takes a lot of time. And in the meantime, Trump has unilaterally changed the terms of whatever the treaty is. And yes, that surcharge on Canadians, on American goods, would go into effect immediately.
Don would like to know, and it follows up exactly on the point that you made, but we'll just reiterate, is there any ability through international structures such as the UN or the WTO, I would add there too, but he mentioned the UN, to stop President Trump from threatening Canada? And then he goes on, this is a bit of a two-parter, what gives him the right to destabilize and challenge the existence of Canada?
Well, I mean, let's take the first part, which is that, again, we come back to the World Trade Organization. You know, you have a general agreement on trades and tariffs, which has been there since the 1960s. You've had the rules of the game, which have been set out. And you can take action before the WTO to say that there's an unfair trade practice which is taking place. The problem here is that, again, you know, it takes, well, not just months, it takes years for WTO to sometimes resolve this. And Trump is a politician that's acting on an immediate basis. You know, he's not even going to go with consultation through the U.S. government. He's just going to say, we do it today. And this could happen on day one of his presidency. Second part of the question, and it's a great question in a broader sense. Look, nothing gives Donald Trump the right to threaten Canada. Nothing in the U.S. Constitution, nothing in U.S. law gives him the right. There's nothing in the current U.S.-Canada situation. Because, again, there was a renegotiation of the trading and tariffs agreement only a few years ago. Nothing gives him the right. But the point here is, Heather, for me, Donald Trump is not a politician who plays by the rules of the game. And analysts need to stop. They need to stop treating Trump this way, especially in light of that bizarre press conference yesterday.
Well, on that point, because not only just is not even on the tariff point, I guess, on the whole 51st state and the whole expansionist theory, which he's really laid bare and did so in that news conference yesterday. I mean, the second, there is an additional part to Don's question, which what can we as Canadian citizens do to maintain Canada as an independent nation and stop the expansionism of the U.S.? There will be other citizens in other countries. I'm sure Denmark, Greenland, the whole thing on the Panama Canal, everyone wondering about this current direction. So is there an answer to that part? Is there sort of anything internationally we can do in response?
First, again, To start with, as Canadians, I'm going to humbly suggest that you realize what Trump is doing here. And that is, first of all, Trump is a bully. This is the way that he's always operated in business. He's always operated this way as a politician. So he is trying to intimidate you. That's the first thing. Secondly, he's a troll. And those people who know the term trolling on social media, this is what Trump does. And why does he do it? He does it to unsettle. He does this to disturb. He does this to try to divide people and get them quarreling amongst themselves. Now, if you face a bully and a troll, what do? First of all, you unite back in response. And on the immediate 51st state silliness, and it is silliness, every major leader in Canada, Justin Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, the leaders of other parties have said, look, this is just completely out of bounds. But you need to go beyond that, I humbly suggest. You not only have to push back on Trump, you then have to unite on other issues where sometimes you have tensions. So Canadian politicians need to have a firm line regarding tariffs, and they need to avoid party politics dividing them on this. And may I humbly suggest to Canadians, please remember that a lot of Americans do not support this type of bullying by Trump. This is not a position that Americans would necessarily support. So reach out to Americans and reach out to them to encourage them to have a decent and tolerant discussion rather than letting Donald Trump steal the news cycle and dictate the terms of the conversation.
It's a similar point that another of our viewers, and I'll make this the final question this time, Professor, but thankfully you're coming back later in the morning. Krista Wiley writing in more of a statement than a question, but it does get to exactly what you're saying. Didn't it used to be a huge deal to give even the semblance of interference by a foreign government in Canada's political affairs? And then she goes on to talk about past incidents, but then she said, I'm not sure what referring to Canada as the 51st state and calling Prime Minister Trudeau governor is, if not gross interference by a foreign government in Canadian affairs. So she would be reiterating your comments or expressing a similar sentiment. In terms of response, I don't know if you've heard what the Prime Minister did in terms of his social media post. I'll bring it up. Did you hear what he said? There's not a snowball's chance in hell, frankly, was the phraseology from the Prime Minister in response to Canada's becoming a 51st state. And that was certainly the strongest tone that we have heard from him. Now, he's just announced his resignation, so I'm not sure what the strategy was. But in terms of tone and discourse, is that the kind of thing that you think we should see or what?
Okay, I'll make 3 quick points because of time here. But that's again, to Krista, that's a great point. Chris, first of all, let's realize what Donald Trump did yesterday. Donald Trump threatened war. He threatened war on Greenland, and he threatened war on Panama, as well as threatening economic pressure on Canada to make you the 51st state. Secondly, realize the significance of that Trump does not play by the rules. And the question is, do Trump's advisors also not play by the rules? And third, may I humbly suggest that where Justin Trudeau, for whom I have a great deal of respect, made the mistake was going down to Mar-a-Lago to see Trump in person, especially on the tariffs issue, and say, please don't do this. Because in Trump's eyes, it made Trudeau look weak, and it made Canada look weak. You cannot appear to bow down to Donald Trump with respect and with decency. And as Canadians, you reply, in my humble suggestion, which is, we will deal with you as an equal, Mr. Trump. We will deal with the U.S. government as an equal, but we will not be subservient to you. And we will take this to the level of proper discussion rather than threats in your press conferences or on your Twitter feed.
Professor, thank you. I'm going to gather more questions for the next couple of hours and come back and carry this on, if you will, with us later this morning. But thanks for this first installment.
Thanks to you and all the great viewers.